morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are joining us from around the world. Thank you for joining our live session. You are all very welcome. Before we get started, I just want to run over a few house rules. I'm sure you're all very familiar with video conferencing software nowadays. But I just wanted to remind you that we are recording this session and we will share it live on our social platforms and YouTube channel, hopefully later today. We've been collecting some questions throughout the week ready for this session, but you can of course ask your own questions as the discussion is taking place. Simply use the chat panel or the Q&A box. I think they're located at the bottom of your screen, and we will do our very best to get through all of the questions. If we run out of time, or if we're not able to get through them all today, I will ask Theresa to write some answers, which we can email out to you all. And alternatively, if you have some questions that you think of after the event, you can email Theresa using her email address, which I will put on at the end of the discussion. She will, of course, do her very best to get back in touch with you as quickly as possible around her other roles and responsibilities. So this is the first of our 4 live Q&A sessions today as part of AVA's Online Learning Week, and I am joined by my colleague, Theresa Lingg. Theresa works in AVA's customer support department and brings a variety of skills, including the ability to speak an impressive 4 languages. Theresa has a very creative background, which is why we've asked her to take part in today's session. But before we dive into this, I'm going to ask Theresa to just quickly introduce herself and give us a bit more detail about her background journey.
Hey Jodie, and hey everyone. As Jodie mentioned, I'm Theresa. I've joined AVA 1.5 years ago now. I did originally study costume with textiles at the university in Huddersfield. After that, my career took me to different opera houses in Glasgow, in Munich, in Leeds, and yes, focusing on the costume and textile aspect of it. And yeah, now I'm here bringing all that experience into the software work.
Excellent. Are you ready for us to jump in and get stuck into some of these questions that have been sent in to us?
Sure, let's go.
Okay, let's get started. So, the first one's really good actually because it relates to our online learning week. So, what were some of your biggest lessons when studying design?
I'd say that I was definitely not fully aware of how much you have to consider the construction and the setting of it all. I've liked designing and sketching my entire life, but then actually thinking about how are you going to make it and who's going to wear it or where's the design going to be displayed. It's everything in a completely different context. Mm-hmm. So that was definitely a big learning curve from producing really pretty designs to actually realizing this is maybe not what this is about.
So thinking about that practical element sort of affected the way that you started off with your designs.
Yeah, it definitely had to become more and more considered, especially in costume. You if you think about all the different scenarios, you will have dancers who have to move in a certain way. You will have opera singers who don't want to be restricted. Okay. You've got certain rules that you need to follow, and the same applies for textiles, whether you design for home furnishings or you design for placement print on a dress or whatever. Different rules apply, and you need to be aware of that setting before we go on that design journey.
Yeah, excellent. Some really good examples there actually to help us relate to them. The next question's quite a popular question that we tend to ask designers when we do interviews with them. And that is, where do you get your inspiration from?
So I think they're probably a different answer depending on who you ask every time. Personally, for me, it's not like a muse is coming by or something, but I actually need to do research. So again, depending on the context, I'll look at visual imagery, a lot, but I also really like to dive into the history or the cultural context of a topic. And even just reading specific words or adaptations or other designs that have already been produced can be really, really helpful as a starting point. And then quite often I find you get inspired by the people you work with. So it depends. Sometimes you're just asked to deliver a design and that's it. But sometimes it's a bit of forth and back. You bring an idea to the table and they'll give some feedback and you realize, oh yeah, I could move it in this or that way. And this is usually quite an enriching process, even though it can be challenging depending on who you work with.
Of course, yeah. We've just had a quick question come in here from a student, actually, from a university. And did you find that industry was very different from what you expected after university? That's a really good question from somebody studying textiles.
I did, yeah. I was personally really eager to get started working, even though I loved my studies. But I did then realize when I got into it that a lot of what I learned to include, like we were always asked to include mood boards and really explain our themes, have really good working drawings to make it very clear how this would be constructed, to fully render designs. But actually in a lot of aspects from industry, the designers themselves are so rushed because they're involved in so many projects. Yeah. That it can be a matter of they've just printed something off and say this kind of way, but possibly in this kind of colorway, possibly in this kind of setting. And there is a bit more of interpretation work to do for the makers or the production. Another thing which I struggled with initially was my course it had lots of facets. We had to learn textile print, digital print, different CAD softwares, but also analog designing, so to say, and the actual construction of the costumes. When you then choose a job, it's very rare that you have all these different aspects of a work process. And while it enables you to get really stuck down and really learn a trade, it can also be frustrating when you're used to having so many things influencing your mind, stimulating your mind all the time.
Yeah, really interesting. I have another question actually from a student, but from a first year student, so just getting started on their journey, I guess. Did you find it difficult or daunting changing to CAD after only having designed on paper before? It's really interesting.
Yeah, I suppose I did. I was absolutely useless in the beginning. I only ever worked on paper, sketching, not really moving around in the digital world that much. And then starting to work with Wacoms and IMAX, and in the beginning there was a lot of frustration going on. However, it does have its benefits, and even though I was possibly slower than others at learning this, I feel now very, very comfortable. It is just a learning curve. It enables you to be very, very flexible with your work. But I would definitely say if you are very comfortable working on paper and this is kind of your medium, that's how you express yourself, maybe try and combine the two. The one doesn't have to cancel out the other.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And so how could you summarize some of the benefits of CAD? Have you got any other benefits or top tips that you could share about using CAD?
I would say that for me, it was definitely the combination of the two. So I would work on paper or collages, scan them in, and then start digitalizing them this way. So I would copy and paste a lot. You've got then the options of introducing lots and lots of different textures of photographs, of all sorts of things to really enrich in your design work. And more importantly, you can so easily share it. Also the option to to just undo a step.
Yeah.
It took a lot of pressure off me. Because initially, I would really think about where every single color goes, where every single pattern goes. And obviously I still do that, but it's nice that this way you can play around, you can have a bit of fun. If it looks awful, you open up your history and you go back.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. That's probably a bit of a blessing, isn't it?
Yeah.
A magical skill.
It absolutely is. And it's almost like a bit of a working journal. It's easier to keep steps. I can be like, okay, this is version 1, then you move it further away, and you can keep all these different copies, and it's not a lot of extra work.
Yeah. Oh, cool. Thank you for that. So I understand that you learnt Photoshop at university, and I think that that's used predominantly through most of the universities. So did you find it challenging when you actually started to learn AVA's software, when you came to us and started using AVA?
Initially, yes. But the reason for that was that I tried to learn it before I started having training.
Okay.
So I thought, I've learned Adobe, so surely I can start at least doing some simple designs in AVA. But I think a lot of people will have the same background, that you're used to working in images. So for me, the concept of having layers was really bizarre, because I just didn't understand that all of AVA is based on the printing process, which obviously in itself is in layers.
Mm-hmm.
So I was so confused, I couldn't even paint in the beginning. And I was like, why am I only painting in one color? And if I put a completely different color on, it's just a shade different of that color. Am I losing my wits? But as soon as I then had training, it starts to make sense very, very quickly. And now when I work, still sometimes between Photoshop and AVA, I really struggle with Photoshop because I'm so used to the way AVA operates now.
Yeah. They do go hand in hand sometimes, don't they? So are there some similarities between the applications, or as you said, do you still sort of struggle?
Yeah, I think the biggest difference for me is the coloring aspect of it. We have a similar function called partial images, which is a little bit similar as to how you would work with images in Photoshop. So you have the same transparency, so you can use and move designs around. We've got a lot of similar tools, like the magic wand and carbon copy, which is not called carbon copy, but I will remember. And obviously you do also kind of already start working with layers, but in a different sense.
Mm-hmm.
So it was not completely different, and what's very helpful is almost all the shortcuts are the same. So we'll sometimes have also now customers joining AVA, and as soon as you show them the shortcuts, they're very happy and relieved. They're like, oh, nothing's changed.
Yeah, helps with the workflow then, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, this is an interesting one. It was submitted anonymously. Did you know what you wanted to do for your job when leaving university, or did you find it hard stepping out of university and going into the industry?
I suppose in a sense I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I already had a job lined up because my degree had a placement year as part of it. And in my placement year, I worked for the Bavarian State Opera and Ballet. Mm-hmm. And after that, they said when I finish my degree, I can have a job, which I was really, really grateful for, and I really enjoyed it.
Mm-hmm.
So in that case, I suppose the actual decision of which career path I want to follow was kind of taken away from me, which was very good. When I had a couple of other jobs working in tailoring and this kind of thing. And I did find it hard because you have so many options, and sometimes it can be a little bit overwhelming figuring out what you want to do. Mm-hmm. And I don't think I would have ever thought that I'd work for a software company in textiles and surfaces. And now, in hindsight, it's a bit surprising because I did work a lot with technology during my degree and I really, really enjoyed it. But I think I possibly grew up with the idea that creativity is always linked to visual creativity, whereas you can be incredibly creative in troubleshooting, problem solving, even managing. So if you do study something with design, don't feel you have to literally work with design. There's so many facets out there. So I definitely advise have a look, have a feel in, what you sense, what you're really enjoying. Go for that.
That's good. That's really good advice. Thank you for sharing with your insight to that. Last one to wrap it up. You'll probably be relieved of getting out of the spotlight. Last question. Probably one that relates to a lot of people at the minute, so it's quite nice to finish on this. Do you think that COVID has negatively impacted designers, or do you think the past year has given us new opportunities?
I think it's been both challenging and an opportunity at the same time.
Yeah.
We also in dialogue with a lot of other designers, very much depends on the setting that they started off. There are designers that work in a team and you influence each other, you're very close to production, and I think in that case it was really hard working from home, having to send your proofs to the studio but not actually being there. And I think in that case it forced a lot of ways to become much better friends with technology than maybe they were before.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think it's all enabled us to slow down a little bit, maybe take inspiration from standing a bit more still, looking around us. And some people didn't have a change at all. Mm-hmm. Some people already work from home in a studio, and I think for them it maybe was actually easier because there were not as many distractions. However, the lack of trade shows and the communication that you would find in industry, that's hard. It's not even just a platform to be inspired by, but also, of course, to showcase your product, to showcase yourself. And I think that was difficult, that all of that had to be through social media, through digital platforms.
No, I think you're absolutely spot on. I think everybody probably agree with that it was challenging, but also presented opportunities depending on what situation you were in. That was actually our final question of the session, which you're probably relieved about. Thank you for giving us your time and, more importantly, sharing such a close insight to your journey. I'm just going to pop your contact details on the screen there. Hopefully everybody can see those. If anybody does have any questions, feel free to email Theresa at ling@avacadcam.com. Alternatively, you can email education@avacadcam.com. It's not actually on the slides. And we will do our very best to get back to you as quickly as possible. As I mentioned earlier, we will share this recording and it will be available on our social media channels and YouTube channels. But once again, I'd like to thank Theresa and thank everybody for joining us.
Thank you, Jodie. Have a lovely evening or afternoon, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.